Hi, my name is Nick Karn, and this is my EDL 854 Module 16 case study, Missing Booster Club Funds. So, Mr. Stevens is the principal of a small middle school called George Washington. The school has seen a decrease in affluent families over the years due to the resettlement in suburban areas, but the school remains strong with parental support. Mr. Stevens uses this support to balance his duties due to a lack of an assistant principal. One of the main PTA members, Mrs. Bowman, runs the gate or concession stand at times during events and has a very talented daughter who participates in cheerleading. Mrs. Bowman's daughter, who is very talented again, was invited to participate in a national cheerleading contest. This was great publicity for the school. It's great for the student, obviously, and the family. So Mrs. Bowman asked Mr. Stevens if the PTA could provide funds to help pay for the trip. Total turned out to be $798 when she calculated the cost of staying in a hotel with other cheerleaders, the cost of food, and plane tickets as well. Mr. Stevens rejected the idea due to funds raised by the PTA are for the whole group, so the whole student body, not just individuals. After this meeting, there was an athletic contest where Mrs. Bowman was working the cash box, and after the contest, Mr. Stevens counted the money and compared it with the tickets sold and discovered a discrepancy. The discrepancy had been that 10 tickets had been labeled as damaged, yet the total cash amount did not reflect this statement or fact. So the real big suspicion here is that 10 tickets equals $50 and exactly $50 is missing. And Mr. Stevens remembers that during the game he had talked to one of the parents who just got paid and paid with a $50 bill. When he counted the cash, that $50 bill was missing. So there is a lot of suspicion there. So what do we know? We know there's a discrepancy when comparing the total tickets sold to the cash amount. We also know that Mrs. Bowman was responsible for the cash funds during the athletic event. Mrs. Bowman does have a motive for stealing the money or taking the money due to her meeting with Mr. Stevens about the cheerleading contest not being paid for. Mr. Stevens conversated with Mr. Dumas, another parent, and he said that he paid with a $50 bill since it was payday, and Mr. Stevens could not find this bill in the cash bag after the game. What do we need to know? Well, a couple things that we need to know is that was there someone else working the gate with Mrs. Bowen who could account for the discrepancy? Number two, what was the conversation really like between Mr. Stevens and Mrs. Bowman regarding the cheer competition? Was Mrs. Bowman upset? We assume that she would be, because most parents would feel disappointed at least if the principal said that they couldn't help out their student, but maybe she was understanding of the whole situation once Mr. Stevens explained it. Number three, how long of a time period was between that meeting and the athletic event between Mrs. Bowman and Mr. Stevens? So the case study doesn't really tell us how far along that was, how big of a gap that was. Maybe it was the next day, maybe it was a couple weeks later. I think that would be useful information just to kind of figure out if there was still an emotional drive to that, or maybe it really was a mistake and something just got lost. So my plan of action here would be to implement more safeguards to prevent this theft from occurring. Mr. Stevens already has several safeguards in place, such as him walking out with the cash box with security, having different people running different things, and him being present at the game and all these other things. But since he's lacking a lot of staff and a lot of support, he wasn't able to see everything all the time, and nobody ever is. So he put a lot of trust in Mrs. Bowman. Mr. Stevens also could confront Mrs. Bowman about the missing money to see if a mistake was made or she did take it. Finally, I would hold a PTA meeting explaining the situation and how we can handle it as a group. So some strategies of how I do that. So for the first plan action, the safeguards, one strategy I would do is possibly invest in an electronic ticket machine to avoid the damaged tickets. That could be one way if it's in the budget to reduce that risk. Number two is have a teacher or staff member work the cash box, maybe someone who's an actual employee instead of a parent, since it is dealing with cash funds. This could be a challenge, though, due to the size of the school, since it's only 450 students, which means a small staff, maybe lack of volunteers, and maybe the PTA wouldn't be willing to give that up. So that would be an obstacle that maybe you'd have to avoid. And then finally, number three is have two people work the gates. So even if it's a staff member or if it's another parent, just make sure we have another pair of eyes on who's taking in the money and giving out tickets. That way it kind of deters that temptation to take money. Number two, plan of action was confronting Mrs. Bowman. Some strategies here is to remain calm, do not accuse her, um, ask her, ask her leading questions to maybe say, I'm missing $50 from this, and you were working the gate. Would you happen to know what happened? And could you account for that missing? And if we stick to the facts, instead of just saying what could have happened to the money, that could possibly deter emotion and so she doesn't feel attacked or she doesn't feel put on the fence. So then maybe she feels more likely if she did take it that she would just admit it and we could fix the problem from there. The third plan of action is the PTA meeting. Some strategies for this is that this action is really only necessary if Mrs. Bowman does not really obtain the meeting with Mrs. Bowman does not really obtain any results. If she does not admit it or there's an argument or anything like that, I would rather avoid that as far as professionalism goes and stick to the facts and stick to what is right for kids. So if that comes down to it, then maybe we need to have a meeting and we'll inform the parents about the facts and avoid assumptions again, stay professional, and then come to a solution as a group, and which that might take time, especially with dealing with it. So maybe we, instead of doing with the whole PTA, we have a few members and people who are trusted or people who have worked for Mr. Stevens before that he would trust. So those are a couple strategies that I would suggest. Sorry about that. I would suggest to implement and see if that works. So category 3, resolving the issues based on promoting the success of all students. My resolution would to help the success of all students in the following ways. So the safeguards would help protect the funds of students to make sure that they're being funded the proper way. $50 might seem like a small amount to some people, but in this working class community, $50 is a lot of money and it's vital to our students. We as school leaders need to take every cent missing very seriously because every one of them has to go to the students. Maintaining the cohesion of the PTA is crucial to this school. With the lack of funding and staff, parents have stepped up to become leaders in the school, and it is vital to the success of all students that parents stay involved so students see not only that they care and are involved, but also that everything operates the way it's supposed to, and the students have these events and are well organized, and people are coming to their games and supporting them. By number 3, by not assuming Mrs. Bowman did it and approaching her professionally, that is protecting her reputation and that of her daughters. As a school leader, it's up to us to promote all students, and that includes Mrs. Bowman's daughter. So sometimes we forget when we deal with parents that they have kids, and the kids are affected by this. So it would be very, very cautious in protecting not only Mrs. Bowman's reputation, but also her daughter, just because we want her daughter to feel, she's a really important person. Not only is she a good cheerleader, she's probably also a good student, and she's good for the school. So we want to make sure that we take care of everybody, and that includes even in the individual cases of dealing with parents and booster clubs, that we keep in mind that they have kids and that they are important to us. So what was I thinking throughout the case? I was thinking how special of a community George Washington Middle School is. Yes, they are facing challenges with families moving and attendance decreasing, but instead of these challenges really bringing them down, parents and staff have actually stepped up to help promote the success of their students. And I was at a similar place when I was working at the middle school, and it was almost the opposite. Yes, we were having people move, but a lot of people, instead of stepping up, were blaming others or saying, we couldn't do this because we don't have the parental support, we don't have the money, anything like that. So that is kind of something I really thought that was really cool, that they really stepped up and helped their kids. What was I feeling? I was feeling suspicious during the case because I feel like there's some key information missing. I would have liked to hear more about the meeting between Mr. Stevens and Mrs. Bowman and the words exchange, just because I feel like that would be important to me to kind of figure out how that went and if anything really came of it, besides just the fact that they're not getting the $800 so to pay for the trip. Maybe there was a different arrangement we could have done. I would have worked hopefully with Mrs. Bowman to maybe talk to the PTA Booster Club and see what they think, and possibly get a fundraiser for their student to do this, and so that people who are donating the money actually know that it's going to her trip, not just a general fund. So I just wonder if that conversation happened, and if not, why didn't it happen? And then number 3, what was I valuing? I was valuing the support parents show to the school and the trust that Mr. Stevens has in his parents. I feel parental support is discouraged in my current school, and I wish we would value it more. I think in the past we've had parents involved, but as we've grown and as we have become more of a professionalized school, there's a lot less of that happening, and parents mostly take a back seat and are just fans, which is fine in a lot of ways, but I feel like a lot of parents want to get involved. They don't know really how, and they don't really feel encouraged to either. So that's something that I value in a school, and one day, hopefully, when I become an administrator, that I will show parents that I want them to be a part of this process. I want them to have a say. I want them to feel like they're involved, and really that really helps our kids, and that's what it really comes down to. Is if our kids are seeing parents and guardians at games working, that also just creates that sense of community, and it helps kids understand that my parents or guardians care about what I do after school, not just during school or at home. I get to see them in a different light, and they get to see me in a different light as well. They get to see me conversating with my friends, teachers, anybody else as well. So for category 5, component 1 here, so how do I promote effective and efficient management? Number 1, I would make sure that you always hire and employ a competent and effective staff. Also recruit highly effective volunteers as well, such as parents. So bookkeeper, teachers and staff, PTA or booster club members. And number 2, implement safeguards in order to protect school funds. And one I mentioned in this case study was electronic ticket machine, and then a 2-person gate team. And then 3, practice and maintain effective communication and trust with stakeholders such as the booster club and also staff as well. For component 2, how do I as a school leader promote the social learning of every student? So due to the culture and demographics of the school, it's vital that we as school leaders maintain effective relationships with the parents. Keeping parental involvement at school activities helps promote the social learning of every student because it creates a caring and supportive environment. Knowing that parents care about the students' activities will create a positive school culture. However, we as school leaders still need to implement safeguards to protect the students, parents, and school staff from thefts. So number 1 here from the case is George Washington Middle School has a strong PTA that helps with athletics, such as concession stands and gate tickets. Number 2 is Mr. Stevens encourages the support of parents due to his lack of staff. And 3, Mr. Stevens had some safeguards, such as reviewing the logs of tickets sold and a security guard escorting him to the bank after an event, but only had one parent working the gate, which leaves the gate money vulnerable to theft. So how do you as a school leader promote student academic learning? Well, in my opinion, it takes a village to raise a student, and I also believe activities and athletics are vital to the academic success of our students. In order for our students to succeed in our society, they need to be well balanced. According to a 2010 article, and I won't read it word for word, but it was like the spark is called the revolutionary new science of exercising the brain. The author John Rady describes that when he took MRI scans of the brains of people who are sedentary or don't really work out that much, actually their brain activity increased when they started improving their fitness, such as in the hippocampus, the frontal and temporal lobes, and the regions of the brain associated with cognitive functioning. And so a lot of especially the hippocampus is really associated with memory and learning, which is very helpful in school. And so it's important for our kids to know that, and our parents to know that athletics and activities other than just academics are important, and they're related, they're not separate. So one helps the other, and academics can help athletics as well, or activities. So this study shows the importance of fitness with the students' learning. So it is vital that in this case study, Mr. Stevens handles the situation with care and knows the importance every dollar has for his students. That $50 can really make a difference for his kids. And then keeping parents involved in athletics is important to academics as well, because parents experience more buy-in to the school and thus their child's academic success. And finally, keeping parents involved in after-school activities puts them in contact with teachers and staff more frequently to hear feedback on how their student is doing. And it's more of a personal conversation rather than a formal one. And maybe some of these parents can't make it to parent-teacher conferences, so it's important that we promote that and we promote our parents coming to our games. Other than that, that's all I had, and here are my citations. I appreciate you for listening. I really enjoyed the class, and I hope that I did a good job and I learned a lot. So thank you so much.